Well, welcome, friends, to another episode of Becoming an Elite Financial Advisor. Sten Morgan is not here today. If you're watching us on YouTube, Sten did not shrink. This is Kyle. Sten's a big guy. It's not an insult. He's a big guy. But my friend, Sten's friend, Kyle Kuyat, is here. And so, Kyle, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It pays to be only 15 minutes away from you geographically.
Hey, so. That's right. It does. We live even closer than that to each other down in good old Spring Hill. Yep. The Hill, they're trying to make our town sound hip, and they call it the Hill. I'm like, no, it's just a suburb, people. Like, it's not hip. Yeah, but that's okay.
Not yet.
That's it. So we're going to talk today about something that I find absolutely fascinating about this industry, because you generally can't talk about it. Like, that's one of the hallmarks of it, is it's like this happens sort of in the dark of night with separate email addresses, and not like burner phones. It's not quite that far, but like you don't email about this at work. Mm-hmm. You don't take phone calls about this, unless it's, let me step outside and take this call, Mm-hmm. And that is people who are looking, for the most part, sometimes it's people starting off, but for the most part, it's people who are looking to switch. And we've talked about in some past episodes why people switch, but you're in a unique position to talk about why people switch companies and is that a good idea or not. And then we're also going to get into what do companies tell people that are looking to switch that they're either dishonest, misleading, which is a nice way of saying dishonest, right?
Right.
And then how do you prepare yourself, and what are the right questions to ask, and how do you vet a company if you're considering switching? So let's start off with, what is your current role? Like, what's your title and what are your responsibilities with Silver Oak, the company you work with, which is, by the way, not sponsoring, not endorsing, whatever, all the hashtags, whatever. Okay.
I'm not going to plug it too hard, I promise. I'll give people my transparent best here as far as,
So what's your role and what do you do?
So my personal role is the VP of Business Development, more or less, and I'm on the recruiting team at Silver Oak Securities.
Okay.
So bring advisors from wherever they're at currently to Silver Oak and help them explore their options and find the path that's best for them.
Now, I didn't know this number, and maybe you do, but I mean, how many potential options if you think about, you think about how many banks someone could go work for in America.
Sure.
I'm sure there's, 12,000 banks or whatever it might be, being sort of brands, right? Mm-hmm. How many options, beyond the biggies, right? I mean, are there 10,000 different companies that an advisor could go work for?
Not as much anymore. I guess I'll kind of break it down in three different capacities. So, coming from my wholesaler background, there was really, we were always channelized. So you had your wirehouses kind of in one silo, which are your Morgan Stanleys, Merrill Lynch's, et cetera.
Okay.
You have your bank advisors, which are your Wells Fargos, and, there's becoming less and less banks with all the M&A. And then on the independent side, you used to always have all these different options. There were hundreds of broker dealers.
Okay.
There's still maybe way more options in the independent space than there are elsewhere, because there's not these big names that are having these, these larger infrastructures like the wirehouse or bank setup. But there's a lot of M&A activity, actually, so much so that I find an interesting stat from 2009, I believe it is, 17 of the top 25 firms at the time in the independent space, they don't even exist anymore.
Wow.
They've become LPL, they've become Cetera, they've become Advisor Group, any of these other larger conglomerates in the independent space. There's almost 4 or 5 big names that are up there that, a lot of advisors chose to be at maybe a smaller firm or a mid-sized firm.
Right.
But that model, just don't see it as much anymore because of all the M&A, private equity into the space.
Okay. So we're going to get into a lot of details about this, but this episode is for people to explore the idea of why do people switch. And I also want to get into why switching can be a way of hiding from your own sort of inability to just execute, meaning it's not where you are, right? There's one of my favorite musicians, a guy named David Wilcox, and he tells a story about a friend of his, and he would just constantly talk about, man, this girl this and this girl that, and he was dating all these girls and all this stuff wrong with him. And he said, David said to his friend, he said, the only thing all those girls have in common is you. And it seems like maybe you're the problem, because he was kind of playing, this girl's this problem. He's like, no, man, like maybe you're the problem, right? He called him like a serial monogamous person, no, you're not. And I want to talk about that because as a lead advisor network, through Sten's leadership, through our work with advisors, I have conversations with advisors regularly about this topic and those who just reach out to us. Sometimes I have to say, I don't think it's the company. I think it's you. And that's a hard thing to hear, right? So what do you like about your job? What part of your job do you feel like, this is the part of it that's good, that's healthy. I know I can sleep well at night because I'm helping advisors do this. What is that?
I would say there's a couple different things, I guess, just to paint it in a 10-second synopsis for the viewers. So my background came from wholesaling. So I got to see every different business model from the RIAs to mainly the independents. I saw a little bit of the banks and wires, but mainly independents and RIAs.
Okay.
And what I love about my job is I can see what so many other advisors are doing.
Yeah.
Everybody has their head buried in their business.
Sure.
Because they have to.
Yeah.
They're running a practice.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the benefits that you guys have with EAN as well, is you can bring all these advisors in one room.
Yeah.
And hey, if advisor A is doing something that advisor B is trying to do, you can either match them up or they can learn from one another, but these advisors can't. So what I love about my job is I get to have these conversations with them all the time. And selfishly, I have my own practice as well. So if there's an idea that's working for them, they'll be the first to tell me about it, and I can implement it and test it out myself and share it with other advisors. So
some of the terms that maybe we're going to talk about, just in regards to what are the structures that, because really this is about where do you work, right? And why do you work there? What are some of the structures that maybe someone is, because some of this, we have people listen to our show that are in college, and they're just learning about the industry. You know what I mean? So where does your work with Silver Oak come into play? As if I'm a college kid, I'm saying, hey, I want to go, is Silver Oak the right fit for me? Why or why not? Like, what are the groups or the entities that people would consider other than Silver Oak? Where does that fit?
Yeah, I would say, more the independent space. And there's a lot that goes into this. I would start somewhere, I guess if I'm looking at Silver Oak in a silo, we predominantly work with advisors that are either changing independent firms, so going from the independent world at one firm to ours, or advisors that are leaving a bank or wire situation and coming to Silver Oak, or maybe it's somebody that's at an independent firm that wants to join us more on the RIA side. So they're exploring, leaving the broker-dealer world, FINRA behind, and coming there. But for the people that are in the college world, dude, it's tough. I mean, the whole reason I started out in the wholesaling world is because I didn't want to learn one way. I mean, full disclosure, my dad's an advisor. He has a great practice. I didn't want to learn everything that my dad knows. So then because for me as a younger person, I'd rather spend my money and resources and energy on knowledge, which is the whole reason why I gravitated towards you guys. I don't want to just learn how one advisor does it. I want to see how they all do it, because chances are I can copy and paste some of the models that Sten does, but I'm not going to copy and paste Sten from A to Z because we're different people.
Yeah, it's not who you are. Yeah.
And it's not going to feel as authentic. But there are things that Sten does phenomenally that I can implement into my practice. So for me, I wanted to go somewhere that was more of a wholesaling route, because I was introduced to the universe of the financial planning world. I think you have to go somewhere that you can at least study to attain your CFP or start that process. That was a game changer for me, not just from a knowledge standpoint, but really more or less from a confidence standpoint.
Yeah.
Not just for yourself.
We hear that a lot about CFP. It's like, first of all, if we're kind of backwards here, like people generally don't care about the letters. Don't do it for the letters, right? Second is you will learn a lot. And maybe like primarily, it's you just have some confidence. You're just like, I know my stuff. And I know my stuff because I passed this bad boy and it didn't beat me. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because it can hurt. That can be a difficult process. So let me ask you, for your work you're doing, how do you know, or how do you measure if you're doing a really good job? Because I mean, I've heard that some people are just, they're paid by how many people get in. If they don't produce real well, whatever. But that seems to be a losing formula, because then you're just burning through people, right? And your name is not, very good in the market, which is, lots of big promises, but then people leave after 3 months. You know what I mean? So are you, how do you feel about vetting someone and looking at them and saying, I don't think they're going to stick around very long. I think they're just going to go to the next thing. Yeah.
There's a lot of ways to look at it. I would say the first thing is what you talked about before, somebody that changes firms to maybe avoid the problem, which is themselves. I mean, I can see that on BrokerCheck. It's not hard for me. The first thing I do whenever I see a name come through or I'm talking to somebody is probably what some clients are doing, which is looking at BrokerCheck. All the information is out there today.
Wow.
I could see if you've been at 20 firms in 20 years. That's probably not somebody I want to talk to.
Yeah.
I've had so many conversations with advisors that, from a vetting standpoint, I think maybe from the wholesaling side, I've had so many reps with this that I can tell when I'm being lied to and when it doesn't really add up. Yeah, I mean, I want to see if if somebody says, oh, I do $1 million a year, great. Send me your 1099 statement. I believe you, but I want to verify. I'm not going to give you a deal based off of what that is. But I'm not so cutthroat in that direction that I'm all, it's only about numbers, because ultimately you're looking for the character traits, just like like you guys instill in somebody that wants to be part of this group.
Yeah.
Just because you're at 10 or 15 or whatever your number is today doesn't mean that you can't be 10 times that in the future. So it's more or less figuring out who that person is, what they're looking for. And I always tell to people, look, we may not be a fit for you. I'll be the first to tell you either way. But if there is a better fit out there in the marketplace, I'd be happy to point you in that direction or make an introduction. So
yeah. You're like Santa in Miracle on 34th Street, where he's like, you need to go down to Gimbals. They have that toy. And you're like, what? You sent someone to a different store? I might have messed up that story. But anyway, you talk to people all the time, and I'm wondering, what do you see or what kind of conversations do you get to have that like normally people don't have because they're afraid to?
That's a good question. I think a lot of advisors,
like, what are you hearing that people are afraid to say out loud to anyone else? Like if I ask a counselor that question, I'd be like, oh, I hear all kinds of stuff. You ask a pastor that question. Oh, I know all kinds of stuff, right? So I know you're getting to have conversations with people that are at the end of their rope. They're fed up. They're pissed off. They're frustrated, or they've grown and they're like, they're excited about a different opportunity. You know what I mean?
Right.
These are not conversations that because people generally hide those things because they're afraid to bring them generally to their employer because they're afraid they're going to get in trouble for them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is even the larger advisors or the larger teams. You would think that, you're a $500 million office or you're close to $1 billion. You guys mustn't have a perfect system and everything. It's almost the opposite. A lot of these people only know their model or what they're used to, and they don't know the whole entire world that's out there. Because think about it. If you've seen that thing that gets put out from the technology standpoint alone, have you seen, what I'm talking about?
It is.
Where it has the smorgasbord.
Somebody should make like a wallpaper or a t-shirt of that.
Right.
Like it's just I don't know, there's probably 300 logos on that of just all this different pieces of technology that exist to help you, run your business. You know what I mean?
Right.
So your connection with that is that there's so many different angles and varieties and options.
You could mix and match that, and there's probably millions, if you did the math, different categories and ways you could have that come together. But that's how you can run a practice. If you're at maybe somewhere where it's all done for you, never had to think about it, and now you're going to more of an independent model where you can pick and choose those technologies, they're not chosen for you, that could be something that is a whole can of worms. So I think it's asking the right questions just as much from my standpoint. I want to make sure I'm answering questions that they don't even know to ask yet. I think that's the big key.
Yeah, we'll get into that because I think that's the other part. It's if someone's going to go get a job somewhere, it's like I want to make sure that you are asking the right questions before you say yes to something like that. So let's our audience. One of the reasons they really connect with this show and with Sten is because he likes to teach people how to get paid for their time, right? Versus give it away. So you're going to talk to all these advisors, and how much is paid planning? Because I know that Silver Oak is built to handle that and to facilitate that from day one. Where I've had conversations with advisors who are like, I want to leave because they just make it too hard for me to get paid for my time, right? Whether they put a cap on it or they don't allow it, or your production has to be a certain number before they let you do it, or whatever it might be. Or they want to take too much of a high percentage of it, Right. So how does paid planning fit into your conversations with new advisors? How are you using that as an advantage to say, hey, by the way, we work with this EAN group and, we'll help you get paid for your time. Is that something advisors are talking about right now, or is it sort of still a outlier?
I always say if you're going to make a move, don't make a lateral move. There's no reason to make a lateral move unless you just absolutely hate where you're at. Even if that's your initial starting point, chances are there's a lot of things that you can either implement or improve on. Fee for planning should be one of those things, especially if it's somebody listening to the show. I would imagine that it would be.
Yeah.
What you have to also understand and think about is, hey, maybe the firm you start at, I tell guys this all the time because you ask me this question. Maybe you started at a firm that gave you some kind of salary or some form of a guarantee where you weren't out there on your own island at the beginning. But just because that was a great place to start doesn't mean that's a great place to continue on or to finish.
Right.
And when it comes to ripping off the Band-Aid, it's not fun to move firms. It isn't necessarily on the surface easy, but there's a lot of things in technology. I would say changing firms today is a lot different than it was 5-10 years ago. But For example, I'll just use this one as an insurance-based model, right? If you have a company that was an insurance-based broker dealer, chances are if they have proprietary product, you have to sell that product. If you're doing a fee for planning model and you have to sell product, does that conflict with your business model and your values or whatever it may be? Maybe, maybe not. But the ease of even getting money from a client for a fee for planning. So just one more example. I mean, I've seen it where there is no system. You have to have a check in hand.
Wow. Yeah.
Do you want to have 100 fee for planning clients? Are you going to chase them down for money? Literally?
For a check, yeah.
I mean, that's a whole job in and of itself.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
you have to find somewhere that makes it easy and fits your model, whatever that may be, whether it's fee for planning or commissionable. But
I love that.
It's a separator for sure.
I was talking to a friend of mine recently, and he was telling me that because my son's 15, he has to learn how to drive soon, and my friend was telling me about his daughter going to driving school, and I was like, I remember watching these videos in driving school, and basically what they try to do is they try to scare the crap out of you, and then show you these videos of people crashing, and be like, don't be this guy. But it's a good reminder, like, hey, this is a big deal, and so we're going to show you the worst case scenario.
Right.
So I tell you that story because I'm wondering, could you tell us just a couple quick anonymized, remove the names to protect the guilty, like what could go wrong? Like, what have you seen either from other people that said, hey, Kyle, not for me, I'm going to go with, whatever investment, whatever. And then they call you and you're like, oh my gosh. Like, what could go wrong when you're switching like this? Like, how could you really, really screw this up? Either because they didn't tell you the truth or because you didn't move to the new place in a, in a responsible way. I mean, I just got this vision of someone like moving in their house, taking all their stuff, and then like someone forgot to close the back of the U-Haul and they're driving on the road and stuff's just falling out.
Right.
Like that happens to people's businesses when they move it over. Like their book of business just falls apart. Right. So scare us with some truth about like, you need to make sure you're thinking about these things. Otherwise it can go really bad.
I think a big one, and I don't hear it as much anymore. I think more advisors have woken up and smelled the coffee on this one and I think the biggest one is really the upfront money. I've had advisors refer to it as the blood money. And the reason I say that as the first one is there are strings attached to it. There's no free checks. For example, a bigger firm that's giving you an upfront check, it's not like they're just giving you free money out of the goodness of their heart. They're going to make money on you or on your business or on your clients.
Right away.
Whether it's not right away, they're going to make it over time. And where I see advisors make the mistake there is they'll take it, but there's a note typically attached to that. Typically, it's 5 to 7 years. Right. So if you get that, let's say I moved to firm A and they gave me my upfront check of $1 million. Maybe I feel good the day it hits my bank account, but 12 months, 24 months, I'm thinking, this is a miserable experience. I can't get anything done. My team or my staff or myself, we're wasting time even just trying to get help. I'm calling an 800 number and I'm talking to 6 different people and I'm doing the 80-20 rule, but reversed. I'm spending 80% of my time on things I thought that was going to be solved by this change in this firm, but they're not. Right. The problem with the upfront money conversation is you have to come back up out of pocket for that. So that's literally where you can be stuck. If you get into some kind of contract, I would say make sure you have an attorney review your contract before you actually make a change.
Yeah, that's scary.
It's worth a couple $100 to have somebody look at it than not. No matter where you go, whether it be with an independent firm, even if you're not taking any upfront money or there's no note or strings attached to your contract, you want to make sure what they tell you is true. Unfortunately, like I said, I come from the wholesaling background in the annuity world. Annuities get a bad rep because of a lot of things. I think because there's sort of half truths, or maybe there's advisors or even clients necessarily. It could be anybody that doesn't understand the moving parts.
Yeah, I think anytime you're having a transaction where one party does not fully understand what they're taking part in, that feels confusing, deceptive. Even if you're like, well, they should have known. Okay, maybe they should have, but they didn't, right? And so I think that's good, and it's a good reminder to slow down, because I think when you start seeing a bunch of zeros behind the numbers, your judgment, that's appealing. And so sometimes we'll stop asking questions instead of asking more questions. You know what I'm saying? Because those numbers are like, oh, I want that.
Well, right? every single time I talk to somebody that is considering the upfront money, I say, okay, well, what about these other things? Here's the things. I think I told you this the other day. I always say to guys, I'll tell you all the things that firm isn't going to tell you, or here's the questions you should be asking.
Yeah, we're going to get into that.
Compare them.
Yeah, we're going to get into that, because I think that's where you got to know the right questions to ask.
Right.
I've heard this from Kittis, and I'm not sure he maybe not isn't the only one who said it, but he popularizes a lot of things because he's very popular. Which is that most advisors stay at their third place the longest. And so, can you kind of break that down for us? Like, is that true? Not to a it's not gospel truth, but like, why does that happen? Or is that, first of all, do you agree that's generally true?
I don't know
Third or
about the third necessarily, but I understand his rationale as to probably why he's saying that.
Right. All right. Well, break that down. Like, forget he said that then.
Yeah.
Like, where do you think people land? How many times do you think people move?
Well, I'll tell you this.
And why?
Every person, 98% of them that I talk to, even if they don't join us, they all say to me, well, I want this to be my last move.
That's really interesting.
It happens all. I mean, I
think I might have just gotten our show title. I mean, it's like I was looking at like, what's that zinger? Like, will this be your last move? And they say that because they just don't want to. They just don't want to. I mean, I think about people when they move like houses. They're like, I don't want to move again. I don't want to move again. The process is blah, right? So 98% say I want this to be their last move.
Almost everybody does. I even in the initial conversation, it's almost the first thing they say is, hey, look, before you even get started today, I want to let you know I've done this 4 times. I've done this 3 times. I've done this X amount of times.
But I guess the alternative is to say, like, hey, just so you know, I'm probably going to switch in 5 years. Like,
well, somebody's saying that, I'd say, look, we're probably not a good fit for you. We want this to be your last move too. We want it to be a long-term relationship. Right. And I to answer your question on the Kitsis side, I think a lot of the advisors that I've seen, if you look at the traditional advisor, average age is 62.4, roughly, something like that.
Wow.
Most of those guys, and if you look at the business back then, a lot of those guys started out in the insurance industry. Or they started out in like an investment wirehouse. He was like one or the other. I couldn't tell you how many guys I've seen start at insurance companies that don't even exist anymore. Maybe they run under a different name now.
Yeah.
And I think the model of our business has progressed from maybe it was more of a transactional business.
Sure.
Then they went and they got their Series 7 and maybe there was a different firm that helped them with that. And then now it's more, I think the trend today is more fee for planning.
Yeah.
More of an, I would say an RIA, if you will, based model.
Absolutely.
Where they can interact with clients the way they want to without a broker dealer model is really kind of outdated. People say, oh, I'm looking for a new firm. And guys tell me I hate broker dealers. I hope you're not offended by that. I'm like, I do too. Most broker dealers suck.
Because?
They stand in the way of trying to get business done. In a lot of ways. Well, I'll give you one example. From a marketing perspective, we're doing this podcast today. I had so many advisors that I've asked about, what are you doing for marketing? Well, I'm doing the canned stuff that's automated because that's all I can do. I had an advisor that was at a wirehouse that was trying to do a monthly newsletter, and it took his compliance office 3.5 weeks to review. So by the time that, and it was this year.
So basically, like if they wanted to do it, they had their Thanksgiving newsletter came out on Christmas.
Right.
So, yeah.
But it's irrelevant. I mean, you're not going to sell it to a client. So you're embarrassed by it. So what are you going to do?
Because it's
you're
a market
stop.
update. Yeah. Yeah.
So whether it's that or whether it's I think a lot of times it's for guys, it's compliance is probably one of them, whether it be from a review standpoint.
Yeah.
I think the other big thing is service. What guys and girls, any advisor, right? What they really want, I think a lot of times is intimacy. Right? We call the cable company. We don't want to be on hold. We don't want to talk to somebody new every single time we call the phone for the cable company, let alone our livelihood in our business, right? If I'm calling my back office.
Yeah, another way I say it too is I want to just talk to another human. And by that I mean, I don't want to talk to just a person or an employee. Like, I want to talk to someone that says, man, that's frustrating. Thank you. I'm not blaming you. I just want you to like understand, like, wow, that's, man, I called about this like 2 weeks ago and it hasn't happened. The first thing I want them to say is, man, that's frustrating. Let's get this figured out. Versus like, well, did you do this? Like, talk to me like you're sitting across from me and you like actually care more on the same team. Mm-hmm. All right. That goes a long way. Right. So let me ask this, if I can switch it up a little bit.
Sure, go ahead.
Well, how do you find out if a company is who they really say they are? Because I've had advisors that, they switch and they say, yeah, we're going to help with moving all your clients, yada, yada. And they show up and they're like, yeah, I don't know who told you that, but like, we don't do that here. And that was with a smaller company. But, but maybe we call this episode Trust But Verify, right? But like, how do you trust someone but then verify without, getting married first? You know what I mean? How do you do that?
There's a couple ways to do it. I think the first thing is to you asked me the question earlier about how, just bring people on. I think a lot of these people call themselves business development, but they're really just recruiters. They don't care about you. They don't care about your practice. And you have to, I think your initial conversations have to go follow your gut, follow the gut feeling of the person you're talking to, because that's the best that they're going to be in the very beginning. And you like a relationship, right? Your first date, in reality, maybe that person is the same on the sixth date. Hopefully
but I'm skeptical about that, Kyle, because I feel like a lot of these people are just like, they're in that spot because they're just smooth. And I guess one of my concerns is like I've met someone, I'm like, dang, they're smooth. And so my guard goes up because I'm like, dang, they're smooth. You know what I mean? Like, they're going to be, I don't know that they're hiding something, but I'm like, you're so smooth. Like, and not that you want them to be like rough or like average or weird or awkward, but like, I guess one of the questions I would have is, if you're thinking about switching and the answer is always exactly what you want to hear, like that, to me, that would be a red flag. So maybe like offer some red flags of like, if everything you ask for, they say yes to, either you have an enormous book of business and, you're 30 years into the business and they're like stupid. Of course, they're going to bend over backwards and go, yes. Like, how can you ask someone and find out? Because even here's my other concern is if they say, well, give me some people to talk to. Well, they're going to pick some people to talk to. Right. Who maybe have had just a glorious experience. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so, this is one of the questions we get in EAN, which I appreciate, is because we've got people who work for all different kinds of companies and independents, so on and so forth, is they say, hey, do you know anybody that works for so-and-so? Oh yeah, they just switched to so-and-so. Let me put you in contact. And, they've been with them for 6 months, and then you'll figure out, versus sort of the hand-picked references. You know what I mean? So what are the questions that you should be asking?
Well, let me answer in two parts. The first part is how should you figure out that path of trust? I think the first one would be call the advisors. You can go on broker check, type in the firm name, make sure that they're still actively registered, make sure you uncheck the previously registered box. Call a couple. The other one, I told you this, the benefit that I had in the wholesaling world is I knew so many different broker-dealer models, even though I wasn't at those firms. I had 50 advisors at probably each firm, or a handful, right?
Gotcha.
So call your wholesalers. They're totally unbiased.
That's life hack there. Life hack. Hashtag life hack alert. That. I love. So I'm gonna pause real quick because I love that.
Sure.
That's cool, dude. I love that one. Don't ask them for references. Ask a wholesaler and say, give me 5 names of people that work for blank company.
Right. Or what do you know about Silver?
Because the wholesaler is like, the wholesaler really more works for you because you're their client, right? Versus the recruiter, if you will, or business development person who their client is the company.
Can I take that one step further?
Go ahead.
Ask the wholesaler that you do the most business with. Because chances are, if your business model, let's say my business model is more variable annuity business, and I'm going to ask my annuity wholesaler, I want to know how they do.
Okay.
How is processing?
Let's back up real quick.
Yeah.
Ask because I want to break that down because that's genius. It's next level, right? So that was the average. Now here's the elite. The elite is, the average is ask a wholesaler. Maybe the average is you ask the person recruiting you.
Sure.
The semi-elite is that you ask a wholesaler. The elite is you ask the wholesaler of the kind of business you do the most in, because they're going to talk to other advisors who work for the other company that do this, they do the most business, that kind of business with. Like they sell that product. Right?
They see the other side. I mean, my biggest holdup as a wholesaler wasn't necessarily the other companies. It wasn't the other companies that were my competitors. It was these back offices that would hold things up or make business difficult. Whereas at another firm, that kind of business at least was easy to do. So like, let's say, for example, you do a lot of UITs. All right. Ask your first trust guy. Yeah. Hey, guys at Silver Oak, for example, is it easy to do UITs? What's it like? What's their platform? What are your opinion?
Yeah. I love that. That's awesome. Next level. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. A couple more. How long do you think this should take? And how much does that vary based upon like how many years? Is it the size of the book is going to add? Like I've heard it said, for every $10,000 in your salary, I'm trying to remember if it's like 3 months or something like that, is how long it should take you to find a different job. Like if you're switching or something like that. So the idea is like if you're making $40K, like it should take you like 4 months to find a different job. Like if you're just looking for a job, but if you're making $400K, like expect it could take a year or something or more, because the more substantial the move, the more research you want to do. Right. So what's maybe the longest and then the shortest, and why?
Good question. I'm going to start here. So look at your contracts. If you're somebody that's leaving a firm where maybe you're leaving a wirehouse or a bank where you don't really own those clients, your next move is going to be a little bit harder to navigate versus if I'm fully 1099 independent contractor. These are my clients. I can tell my clients ahead of time.
Yeah.
And on the back end, it's a totally different transition.
Yeah. Great point.
So that's where I would start. From there, Andy, I'd say it's probably about 6 months is on average is what I see from an average of
from when they make the decision. Oh, okay.
To me, to when they get onboarded. And then, but like I said with that, you don't want to make a lateral move. I always want to see guys, we're in business development. We're going to develop. I mean,
right.
our MO is.
We want it to be an upgrade.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the last piece of that from a transition side is you want to make sure that you're really going to the right place and that you're prepared and that your staff is prepared. So if it's just Kyle moving firms, that's about 6 months. If it's Kyle, Andy, Sten, a handful of us together, we're going to move a firm. Well, there's multiple personalities.
That'd be a fun firm, by the way.
It would be fun, yeah. There's a lot of different personalities, and maybe your business model is slightly different than mine. So we need to make sure the move is good for all of us and the timing is right for all of us. So typically that's about a year if you see a group.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Last question I have.
Sure.
What percentage of advisors are like, yeah, my company's the problem? And then you talk to them and you're like, man, I don't know if it's the company. Like, and not that you're going to tell them this, but you just go, yeah, maybe we're not a good fit for you. Like, what percentage? Because I've had conversations with advisors, always kind of privately, and is there like some of them are like, man, I thought I should have switched, and I realized it wasn't. They weren't going to solve my problem. I had some internal stuff I got to figure out, right? Mm-hmm. So, what percentage of people do you think should just go, you know what, like, figure it out where you are, or it's like, no, like, you need to go find a better place?
There's a fine line between finding a new place and, it being a fit or not, right? So I don't think the first initial gut instinct should be, well, one thing about my firm sucks or I hate it or it's difficult. I'm going to see if another firm's better, right? That's probably not it. I think a lot of people are coming to the point where it's thing after thing after thing. Okay. All of a sudden, when you start to get a list of recurring problems, or maybe, again, like we said before, maybe it wasn't a problem at the beginning, but your business model has now changed.
Yeah.
And you can clearly see it's not a fit.
Interesting.
Maybe it's time to explore other options. It doesn't mean you have to move today. I always tell people, like, my timeline's yours. It doesn't have to be 6 months or a year.
Yeah.
If it's 3 years and you just are exploring and kicking the tires as to what's out there, where you want your business to go, that's.
And I'm wondering though, like I was thinking about one time I had to buy a new car because my engine died on my car, and it wasn't like, gee, should I get that fixed? It was like, I have to get a whole new engine. I was in a bad situation because I had very few options, and they were all, all my options were expensive. So the reason I mention that is like, I would encourage people, don't wait until your list is so long and your staff is miserable and you hate your life. Like, explore when there's not as much pressure. Would you agree?
100%. I always tell people, have your parachute packed before you get pushed out of the plane. In a lot of ways.
Or you jump.
Or before you jump.
And like, I'm going to make it on the way down. Right?
But Andy, a lot of time it's a mandatory push. I'd say probably 70% of the advisors that have joined our firm in the last year have come from these larger broker dealers, or they're at a firm they didn't sign up to be at. They signed up to be at firm A. They were kind of like you in your car situation. They got bought out by firm B. Now all of a sudden they have to make a quick decision. Do I stay here or do I have to find something else in the next 30 days?
So have the conversation maybe when you don't have to have a conversation.
Well,
right?
It's just always good to know. Yeah. And then that's when you run through the list. Call your wholesalers. Start to do your due diligence. At least, give yourself a path, but sometimes you don't have that option.
Got it. Awesome. Well, I feel like we're on that show. I've only watched it a few times, but the Love or Leave It, like, are you going to fix your house and love it? Or are you going to
love it or list it?
Love it or list it.
Yeah, that's a good show. No, I like that show.
I think I might have done a dating show, Love it or Leave It. So I was talking about
past life.
Yeah. No, I'm not. I was not on the dating show. I was saying that's probably a dating show, Love it or Leave It. But Love It or List It. Yes, that's a better name for a show that actually existed. But it feels like that. It's sort of like, do I stay with what or do I need to move on? So our hope for you, for you watching on YouTube, for you who are listening, is that you would make the best out of the current situation you're in. I don't think there's a perfect situation. I think that there's humans always running the show, and so there's going to be some frustrations at some point.
Right.
But I hope and I believe that this episode's been a help to you who are listening or watching to just know the right questions to ask. You can't get the right answers unless you ask the right questions. And so we hope that our goal is to help equip you to ask the right questions. And again, I want to caution people who are just like jump. Like that's a symptom of a larger problem, I think. And it's not that every situation they're in is wrong. It's that you're taking the wrong things into each situation, right? Mm-hmm. So, Kyle, I want to thank you for your time, and wish you the very best. Thanks for being a part of the Lead Advisor Network and for pointing people to us through your work with Silver Oak. And folks, thanks for listening. I do ask a favor. I've had quite a few conversations recently with our new event coming up in May for howtochargelive.com that a lot of people listen to the show. Kyle, they're not leaving reviews. And so that's when I just automatically hang up on the Zoom. I've got to click, and they're like, what just happened? And I'm like, I hung up you because you didn't leave a review. No, but seriously, leave a review. And I will say this, we still have about 10 seats left for How to Charge Live. So if you're interested in coming, then our hotel discount is still available. Our free whiteboard, we're giving people whiteboards now. It's kind of like one's nice. Better than this one. The one's like the one in my office. So if you're interested in that, reach out to me, howtochargelive.com, and there's a couple buttons on there to schedule some time to talk with me one-on-one. Love to talk with you about bringing you or your team. Kyle, thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Yeah, can I just plug that real quick? I mean, I've been in 2 year live events at this point, and been an EAN from I think the very beginning. I was in the beta test, right? I was in the first round.
You survived the beta.
It's been great. If you're considering it, or even if you've had a couple of conversations with Andy, or maybe you haven't yet, you just listen to the podcast for free. To me, it's worth every penny. Like we said before, you guys and Sten and what you guys have created, you guys are the experts in the fee for planning space.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Which is, again, the same reason I joined you guys. You guys know the questions, not just to tell or to pivot and how to present it to a client.
Yeah.
Because you've done it hundreds and thousands of times and had success. So, and it's the same from my side, with what we just were discussing. So I think you guys do a great job with that. If somebody's considering it, I definitely recommend. And you've done a great job. And thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Thanks, bro. Appreciate it. Let me get your Venmo after the show so I can make sure.
Yeah, well, I'll send it to you. Yeah.
All right, appreciate it. Thanks, man.